Hello and welcome to another episode of Oh So Curious, and it's a special Memorial Day weekend episode. I hope you have been enjoying a great holiday weekend. In the US, of course, we have Memorial Day. If you're watching from any other part of the world, and if it's a bank holiday for you, then hopefully you've been enjoying that. You've been, cooking out of the barbecue, or if the weather doesn't permit, then maybe you're having fun inside watching a movie or just chilling and just hanging out. We're here, of course, to talk about the movies, and it's been an interesting Memorial Day weekend at the box office. So we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about Furiosa. We'll talk about the Garfield movie, and we'll also be talking about Nicholas Hoult. And we've got another look at his bald look for the Lex Luthor. So we've definitely got to get into that and so much more, of course. And I just finished watching the Garfield movie before the show, so that movie definitely goes to show you that Garfield has a thing or has a thing or two for Tom Cruise and Top Gun. So with that in mind, let's start off the show. All right, so let's get into the danger zone.
Yeah.
John, how are you doing today?
Like a little bit better now though with that opening reminding us of what good Memorial Day weekend movies were because God knows it wasn't this, you know. But outside of that pretty good. Pretty good.
That's true. That's very true. I mean, let's dive right into it. We usually start the show with the news, and the news this weekend is that the box office isn't doing all that hot, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we just don't seem to have. I mean, for whatever reason, like movies aren't quite hitting the way that they used to at the box office. Um, some of it has to do with just the fact that we don't have as many of the big franchises out there this year as we would, on Memorial Day weekend. It's the end of May, almost the start of June. We are in the summer months, and Memorial Day weekend usually is a big weekend for big franchise properties. And yes, Furiosa and the Garfield movies are both IP, but they're not exactly movies that you would expect to dominate the box office. Even Mad Max Fury Road didn't quite, kill it, if you will. It more than made
Mhm.
its money back, and was very successful when it came out with Tom Hardy and of course Nicholas Hoult. We'll be talking about him later. He was in that one. That was a fan, Charlize Theron, who of course her character is what this movie is based on. But John, what are your thoughts on where things are today, and what do you think is the reason behind the box office isn't just struggling? It's the worst box office in how many years this year for Memorial Day
I think
weekend?
it
It's like
was
some
like I
insane number.
remember reading it was like since like 1983. I want to say like
Yeah,
41 years, something like that. I think it's just with the fact that I mean they like that we've covered articles where it's like, oh yeah, people are going back to the movies, it's getting better than last time. But I just don't think it is. Yes, we get some hits here and there, like the whole Barbenheimer thing across Spider-Verse and Mario were the like biggest ones of last year. But now it's just like without having any like big Marvel or DC products outside of Deadpool, Wolverine, and Joker, it's kind of it's kind of flatlining a little bit. Like it's just going to show how even though many people want to believe that like oh superhero fatigue all that shit, and there is partially in terms of quality, but like without all those movies, it's kind of they've been falling flat. Like we've gotten
yeah,
original movies that have just been flopping, and even stuff IPs like Furiosa have been flopping. The only like one that's like made like a good chunk of change was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. That was like maybe like that when I was saying when we were talking about that a couple weeks ago, I'm like, oh, this will finally, this will get us over that hump of like just flop after flop. But it just didn't do anything. It's just an outlier, I guess.
It just, yeah.
Because nothing is really coming out this year that, like, I mean, you have like you have horror movies that are bombing. That's saying a lot, considering that usually horror movies are decent money makers because they're so cheaply made, and they usually make their money back within like 1 or 2 weekends. But the fact that Abigail flopped, and that received quite a bit of marketing, because I remember like seeing that trailer a bunch, seeing TV spots for it like that. It wasn't like some other films where it just kind of like snuck by, where it's like, okay, yeah, of course that flopped. It was like $30 million and it failed to reach that. And then on top of that, streaming is another thing where it's like, okay, I'll go to the what do I do? Go to the movies, spend what, $10 for one ticket, fucking $20 on popcorn, a drink, and some candy, or do I wait a
Yeah.
month and for that same price a year, I can get this movie and then an entire library of movies and TV shows is also a major
I mean,
factor.
that's definitely a big kick because it's more than ever, right? Like there's more choices
Yeah.
and more options than ever before. And when you look at just how bad it is this weekend, and we don't like to be negative. We love the movies. We want every movie to do well. I think a rising tide raises all ships, and that tends to be the case for any movie out there. So we don't want to see that Mad Max, Furiosa, and the Garfield movie are struggling. But this is the worst, opening weekend tally for the number one movie at the box office, which was Furiosa. It did start at number one, but
Mhm,
its tally came in at $26.3 million, which is the
mhm.
lowest three-day Memorial Day weekend tally, according to Rotten Tomatoes here, since 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, that made $29.3 million in 1989 on Memorial Day
Yeah.
weekend. That, of course, is the same year where we had like the Michael Keaton Batman movie come out as well that same summer. But that
1989 was a
1989 money,
huge fucking year for movies.
it was a huge year for the movies, one of the best years for the movies of all time, probably. But like that
At least
29.3
one of the
million,
best summers, most definitely.
one
That
of the
was
best
a
summers,
fucking
right?
huge
It
summer.
was. I mean, you look at it not adjusted for inflation, and that's like, I think that 29.3 today was probably close to like 150 million, something like that, or even more. So if you adjust it for inflation, that's not even a fair comparison. But
It isn't.
because back then movies were just simply made for a lot less money. Like when you look at the budget for Mad Max Fury Road, they made it for $150 million back when it came out in 2015. This movie would cost like 168 million. That's not an official number, but let's just say it's in that neighborhood. So you look
Doesn't
at
count
that and then you
marketing at
look,
the moment.
yeah, and then of course the amount that they spend on marketing. But then you look at that and then you look at how much they're making here.
Yeah.
If you
It's
can't
nothing.
even pull in 40 million on a holiday weekend, where it's 4 days that you have to really get this money, like from Friday all the way through Monday into
Right,
Tuesday,
exactly.
you're gonna struggle to really make your money back because at this point, I don't know how many more. Next weekend is pretty dead. We're gonna have a hard time, finding stuff to talk
Yeah,
about next weekend
and the
unless there's a
fact
lot of
that
news. But
it's just crazy too, because
it's
it's like, oh, like, okay, like the Fall Guy or Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare or Abigail. Okay, those aren't really. I know Fall Guy was technically based on a fucking old TV show from the 80s. Nobody
yeah,
fucking remembers except like boomers and Gen X people. All right, like that's an IP technicality, but
right.
it's not Marvel. It's not DC. But Mad Max is still a relatively decently known IP. Garfield is another really good IP, a very well known IP, and the fact that both failed, like put it into perspective, because I'm looking at the box office mojo. You know what did a better fucking opening weekend? And again, this isn't even attributing to inflation. Sex in the City 2. That's fucking embarrassing. The Warner Brothers and whoever made Garfield, I don't know who fucking made it. They should be fucking
I,
embarrassed based on those
that's a
numbers.
good.
That is like like
This
Hangover
was a
Part
Sony picture,
3,
Sony movie.
Epic, like these
Yeah,
like you should not be like struggling to beat Sex in the City 2. Like that's ridiculous. They should be really fucking embarrassed for this type of shit. Like that's nothing. Like you got to go back to the drawing board for this. Like, you really got to figure out, like, because I remember, like, like way back when in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, things would be in the theater for fucking years. Like, I remember to like recoup that budget, years. But I mean,
Literally.
even when VHS was starting to come out in the late 70s, early 80s, even then it would still take a lot of time to actually get released on home video. So you still had that time to recoup that budget in the theater. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, I might be misremembering, and apologies if I do. But like Halloween was in fucking theaters for so long, I'm pretty sure two Halloweens went by with the amount of time that was in the theater. So, it's just like
Yeah.
you really got to go back to the drawing board if this is the type of fucking numbers you're making. Although
It's just
ironic,
it's
Beverly Hills Cop 2 made the list, and that fourth movie's coming out later this year, so which I'm very
so
excited
fully.
for. But
It
direct to
yeah.
Netflix, another streaming.
Yeah.
So
We'll see. We'll see. They should put that out in the theater because, like, clearly there's people want to go see movies. They just don't. I'll be honest. I went to see Garfield today, and most of the theaters that I could try to find most showings, like I could, no matter if it was a smaller theater or a bigger one, it was filled. People are going to the movies. I mean,
yeah,
where I am, like, it was raining all day. So if you're in the Northeast, like, it was a rainy Memorial Day. So people are looking for things to do, and movies is one of the things you can go do. You can take the family with you. It's still cheaper than going to like a sporting event. There's still a lot of things, like if you've got, like, a family of, like, with a couple of kids, you've got you and your spouse, like, it's cheaper to go see a movie than to do a lot of other things you might have wanted to do as a family.
right.
Outside of course, you just want to stay at home. So going to the movies is still a big deal for a holiday weekend. But yeah, I mean, when you look at some of the movies, like you said, there's a lot of movies on this list that you wouldn't imagine outperforming the Garfield movie, or certainly Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. Now, here's the thing: even though those movies are sitting like at 37 and 38, you move up the list, and it wasn't very long ago that we were talking about breaking Memorial Day box office records, because it
Mhm.
was only 2 years ago that Top Gun Maverick came in on Memorial Day weekend after being, held out, basically releasing for like 2 years because of the pandemic, and it broke all the records with an opening weekend that beat out the Admirals and Pirates of the Caribbean, the third Pirates movie from '07, and it had pretty wide distribution, 4,700 theaters. It made $160 million at the box office. That's superhero money. That people were, yeah, that I remember people were like, the movies are back, baby. Like, movies are back. And you know what? Garfield, give it credit, the Garfield movie certainly pays homage to Tom Cruise in several different ways. And I, for one, definitely was feeling the need for speed watching the Garfield movie because of that, because Top Gun Maverick definitely got a few nods. Mission Impossible got a nod in there. I was like, yes, give me all my Tom Cruise nods. I'm not like
Oh
a
yeah.
Tom Cruise like super fan, but I do appreciate what he has done for the movie business over the last few years, because yes, 2022 wasn't that long ago. 2 years ago. Two
Yeah.
years ago to the day.
And
That's
last
when
year,
Top Gun Maverick.
Barbenheimer, hello, like that fucking
Barbenheimer. I
between the two
mean,
of those that made $2 billion.
even last year, think about this. Like, so this is like this
Hell,
is
look at Little
unusual.
Mermaid last year. It's in
Little
the top
Mermaid, like
five.
last year, it made 118 million. So it just feels like this year. I mean, I know one of the reasons why. Like, okay, so I'll ask you this, but I mean, I know that the biggest reason why this is happening is because a lot of studios have pushed their movies out of this year. We know that Disney was going to release like 3 or 4 Marvel movies this year. Only one is left on the calendar.
Yeah.
Even Craven the Hunter got moved all the way to December, because I don't know how much of a train wreck that was, that they're going back to the maybe do a ton of reshoots on it. Blade has
Probably.
been retooling for the sixth time, so we don't even know if that's ever going to come out. Like, so a lot of these superhero movies were not just affected because of the strikes last year in Hollywood, but there's a lot of other mitigating circumstances with these movies where it seems like studios just don't know how to spend their money very well, and that gets compounded with the pandemic, that got compounded with all the issues with the VFX backlog, and then also with the strikes. And we know IATSE is still negotiating, so who knows? I mean, things seems to be going well, but there could be more strikes on the horizon, and this is really starting to show that it's having an impact. I mean, what do you think? Those are all contributing factors, or do you think there's one
Yeah,
particular
no, I
reason?
agree. That was another thing
Yeah.
of like all that. It's just, but it's just Hollywood is going to take the wrong lessons from this. I know they are, because like they'll be like, okay, what do we need to do? We need to do even more dumb decisions. We need to even
Well,
do
just think
even
about it.
stupider crap. Like,
Just think about this. The Fall Guy got put out on digital last week. That
yeah,
was its fourth week in release. Not even a month that it was out. And because it flopped so hard on its face, they were like, put it on digital. I'm like, and here's an example of a movie, Top Gun Maverick, that opened to $160 million, where Tom Cruise was like, "You punks are not taking this out of a theater," and he basically had his foot on Paramount Pictures' throat and was like, "This is gonna play in a movie theater for 6 months, if not longer." It wasn't
yeah,
until like November that movie came out of the theaters, and then it was like months later that it came out, that it showed up
yeah. He has
anywhere
the clout to do so.
on digital. And I remember that movie broke records for digital when it first released online for people to be able to rent it and buy it. And then it came out on streaming. And it just, that was the perfect example of using all of your pay windows to maximize your profits. And I know you can't really treat every movie that way, but you can't also, swing the pendulum so much far in the other direction where the
Where it
Fall
comes out
Guys,
after 2 weeks, like
yeah,
that's
like it's just, it doesn't make any. I mean, like you got to give the movie a chance to recover because, like this week, next week, The Fall Guy could have made a lot more money if people weren't watching it at home because there, quite frankly, aren't as many good options anyway.
like
So,
it
like
shouldn't
people
be
might
less
have,
than a month. Like it shouldn't be
yeah,
less than a month. Like you're not giving them a chance to, it's like, and it's not going to recoup its budget that much on fucking
right,
streaming. God knows that's not going to be the case. So when you have all these factors, it's just like at least give it like like a month or two. Like, come on, like
yeah,
because it's just like I feel with what
it's
Hollywood is seeing, they're like, oh, it's not getting all the money in the first not even weekend, like, oh, opening day it sucks, all right, we're gonna pull it after 2 weeks. It's like, no, let it recoup. I understand it's not the 70s anymore where you can leave it in theaters for 3 years and wait for it to recoup the budget, but you gotta let it breathe a little bit. Like, I understand
yeah,
this was a dull Memorial Day weekend. I do understand opening weekend is very important. I'm not stupid. Like, obviously opening weekend, opening day, very important, but at the same time, let it fucking breathe a little bit. We'll see. Like,
yeah,
maybe because there's nothing coming out next week, maybe Furiosa is going to do even better next week. Who knows? Probably not, because the movie's not really all that great, but we'll get there when we get there. But it just feels, I don't know, like, as you said, there's like an extreme pendulum, and we got to find like a middle ground of like, obviously, don't let it like stay in theaters for like 100 years, but don't pull it after a week. You got to let it breathe a little bit. Pay attention to the numbers, yes, but pay attention to the competition, what's going wrong, what's going right, and try to work
yeah,
around that instead of just like, okay, it failed. Bye bye. After 2 weeks, we'll
right,
try to get it on streaming. It's like
right.
streaming is gonna go the way of the Roman Empire, my guy. It's gonna fucking fall eventually. Like, piracy
It's
is fucking through the roof now because of this
dude,
shit.
streaming is already becoming like cable.
Yeah,
You've
it's becoming
already
like cable. They already,
do you
who released
who
that?
was
Where you get like
it was
Hulu,
it
Netflix,
was
and
Disney.
YouTube for
No, no, it
like
was Disney, Max. So it was all the
Max,
Disney streaming services, Max, and then I think it was one other one, like maybe
I think
Paramount Plus or
maybe Paramount
something.
or Hulu, where it's like now,
Somebody like
oh, it's
that.
a cable
Basically,
package now.
and in response to that, like five other streaming services like Peacock got left out, and like they went and like came together with like four other streaming services
Yeah,
and announced their bundle. So now we have like these two mega bundles that will be available this fall, which logic
cable with
dictates
extra
we won't be
steps.
that far away from next year where those two mega bundles become one super mega bundle because everybody decides that it's in their best interest to provide even more value. So I don't think we're that far away. This is something that people had predicted for a while, and it looks like that's where we're headed. You're gonna have ads, you're gonna have bundles, you're gonna. I mean, I guess the good thing is you can still subscribe to them individually. They just cost a bit more, and you don't have to worry about paying for things like a remote or for like the box. You only have to buy that once. You don't have to pay a monthly fee. So there are advantages to where things are today versus in the past, but you're still kind of looking at that as a situation where you're not going to make more money because your movie's on streaming, because you pulled the trigger on it too soon after, it didn't do well at the box office for the first 2 weeks or something. Like, let the movie sit there and do its work. Like, there used to be a time where movies might get discovered because they were just playing for a while. They didn't hit initially, but then the audiences found them because there wasn't a ton else going on. And for some reason, especially with social media right now, movies can recover. Studios just got to give it time. And I hope that both, Mad Max, well, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, as well as the Garfield movie get that time to get that recovery and make their money. I mean, they're off to decent starts. For Memorial Day weekend, it's the worst start in 41 years and overall for the box office. But we'll see how things go. But coming up next, we're going to talk about one of those two movies. We're going to get into it and we're going to review Furiosa. But before we do that, let's take a look at this.
You just get so lost in this unbelievable experience.
Ladies and gentlemen!
George Miller calls you and asks you, do you want to learn how to drive a car to be a Mad Max? You say yes.
I just wanted to be part of that world, and it was a dream come true when I got the phone call.
This is a really epic film in every way.
All right, so let's talk about Furiosa. It's a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, and while Charlize Theron played the character of Furiosa in that movie, of course, this is going back to her younger years, and we have Anya Taylor-Joy in the titular role. It's a movie that has been on the horizon on a lot of people's movie calendars for a long time. It's been years in the making, and we finally have it. And whether you went into it because you wanted to see what Chris Hemsworth with that nose job looked like, or the prosthetic nose, or you wanted to just see another George Miller movie where it just is about as hardcore punk rock as you could possibly imagine. John, you went and saw this movie, so
Yeah, I
I
did.
do want to hear what your thoughts are, because of course Mad Max set the bar pretty high in terms of this franchise, a franchise that's been
Mhm.
around for several decades. But Tom Hardy did a pretty good job, and Nicholas Hoult was one of the outstanding performances in that movie. But it's been years. Like 2015 was when that movie came out, so it's been 9 years now since we have seen a Mad Max movie. George Miller is in his 80s now, but is he still got it? Like, what do you think?
Um, I mean, from what I've heard of his last movie, 3,000 Years of Longing, which was like kind of like a weird exposition-heavy art film. This was, I guess, a step up from that. I never saw that film, but I will say, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't a disappointment, because it most definitely was. I didn't expect a ton with this movie. I didn't expect Fury Road again, because that was kind of lightning in a bottle. And so this just felt like, in a lot of ways, like Diet Fury Road. It like had all, like, everything on the surface of the film was like that look, the cinematography, the action, the characters, like everything on the surface was there, but it was very hollow beneath that surface. It was very empty. It was very boring. It was very it felt like a shell of what came before. And like, I blame that mainly on the editing and the pacing. Even though Margaret Sixel, who did win the Oscar for Fury Road, came back to do this movie, she was a co-editor, so maybe it was the other guy who didn't do so well. Maybe she just couldn't reignite her, talent from the previous film. But it just, like, it went down and went down hard. This movie should not have been 2.5 hours long. This should have been like an hour, 45 minutes at the most. But I get George Miller wanted to make like another, desert epic. But guys, if you want a really good desert epic in 2024, I would say just watch Dune Part 2 again. Because that was leaps and bounds ahead of this, like, no question. I mean, not saying there isn't any good in this. There's plenty good here. Like, Anya Taylor-Joy, she needs no introduction at this point. She's an extremely, extremely talented actress, and there's a reason she was cast here. She did such a good job. And it's just the problem is the writing and the editing was just not there. And so she just tries her best. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the actors who returned from Fury Road, like Nathan Jones, he was really good. He was pretty funny as Rectus. Very dumb names, but Lockie Hume becomes a Morton Joe
fits
here.
the
vibe. He becomes a Morton Joe here because unfortunately Hugh Keys-Byrne, who played the OG of Morton Joe, passed away a couple years ago, so he could not obviously reprise his role, so we had to get someone else. But he was fine. It's kind of hard to say because he was more of a smaller supporting character here rather than the villain like he was in Fury Road. So there's only so much you can like do with that. But I just felt, I would say the only one who doesn't really do that great of a job is Chris Hemsworth. I'm biased because I have a burning hatred for Thor: Love and Thunder, and I think I've just been permanently just so disgusted by that movie that I just can't like Chris Hemsworth anymore.
I mean, I've heard the opposite. A lot of people think that he is the standout of this movie because
he's a lot of people say
more to
that,
do than Anya Taylor-Joy's Furiosa does. He doesn't have a ton of lines of dialogue, so
everyone says that, but I just can't agree. I mean, if you like him, that's fine. It just I thought he was like trying way too hard to be funny. Like he was just not threatening. And then like by the halfway point, after the halfway point, he's like barely in the fucking movie. So it's like, okay. Clearly he's having fun. Like he is having fun. And that's great. Like I appreciate the fact that like he could just go full ham with it, but it's just like I got nothing from him. I just felt like he was kind of one note, like a lot of the characters were in this movie. That unfortunately, I liked Praetorian Jack. They kind of had the vibe of like he was kind of like a Mad Max parallel, and so like to have when Furiosa meets Mad Max later on, there's like kind of like a parallel there, and I kind of liked that. Like the cinematography is very good. I felt that the problem is a lot of the action since Road Warrior has always been top notch, and I just didn't feel it here. Like I just felt no investment whatsoever. Like you had these like like the entire climax of Road Warrior is still one of the greatest, climaxes to any action movie of all time. Like and then essentially George Miller took that and just made it an entire movie with Fury Road. Every action film in Fury Road was just like, wow. Even Beyond Thunderdome, which has been getting a bit more love in recent memory, that's still like a fun movie. Like the climax of that movie is also really good. Any like Thunderdome seems ridiculous, but it like they had like an investment. I was like curious to like what I was like interested in there. Like here, there was like these action sequences lacked the proper investment, heart pumping action, and edge of your seat thrills that those films had. And even the last 12 minutes of the original movie, which I still view as the weakest of the Mad Max trilogy, Mad Max Saga, Mad Max franchise, was better than a lot of the action sequences in this. And it just, that's unfortunately the biggest problem with this. It was too long. It was horribly paced, horribly edited, and it felt like there was like nothing to grab onto. I'm like, why should I care? And it doesn't give me anything to care about, like with any of these characters. And it's so funny because Fury Road, despite being a fraction of the running time, like made us like immediately invested. Like they made, because the George Miller said with Fury Road, he didn't want it to seem like every other action movie. So he's like, okay, what can I do? So he made like the plot. He didn't make it like some overly complicated, like, oh, it's a conspiracy of this, and this. Got to include this thing. Got to include that. Not saying anything like that's bad. Like, like the upcoming Bad Boys Ride or Die, conspiracy type shit. But like that's like its own thing. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just a different type of thing.
Well, right.
But with Fury Road, he's like, okay, I'm gonna have like literally the entire movie is going from point A to point B back to point A again. That's the movie. So he's like, okay, what do I do to make this stand out, to make it unique? So he drenched it in beautifully shot and beautifully edited action sequences and wonderful character development and a very unique style. Originally, George Miller wanted Fury Road to be in black and white to make it different from all the other action movies coming out.
Yeah.
But
Didn't
then
we get one? We got a version of it in black and white.
yes, we
after
did.
it
We
came out on
did
Blu-ray.
we did get the black and chrome edition on the high octane box set, which I do own, by the way. I haven't watched it yet. I might watch it. I might watch it later today, actually. But the studio said no. He's like, no, we're not doing that. So I was like, okay, crank up that saturation and made it like just in your face hues, colors, and saturation. And you know what? That was awesome. Here, it's just like the characters, there was nothing. It was so empty. I still enjoyed myself, like, for the most part. Like, on a whole, it's like, okay, it's fine. But it just, the unfortunate part, it felt like one giant cold open for Mad Max Fury Road instead of it like standing on its own 2 feet. Like, I understand it's a prequel and it's tied heavily to Fury Road. I get that. That's a nitpick, probably just for me. That's probably not even an actual like an actual con against the movie. But I just wish it had more of an identity. Like, I know this is unfair because it's a TV show, not a movie, but I always go to Better Call Saul, where that was just such an exceptional prequel, arguably even better than Breaking Bad, and that stood on its own 2 feet. Yes, it used characters from the previous show with Breaking Bad, but it still felt like its own show. It was so different from that show, and it worked so extremely well. It's a little bit unfair because that's a TV show. It has more time to develop. It has more time to do the things it wants to do rather than a 2.5-hour movie. But X-Men First Class, like, that was another good example of a good prequel. It just that was the main issue here. Like, a lot of prequels are unnecessary, and there's a reason for that when you're making stuff like this. It just felt unnecessary, and I felt that nothing was added to Charlize Theron's Furiosa in Fury Road. Like, I feel like we know the same amount of information we did by the end of Fury Road as we had at the end of Furiosa. It's like some things just keep it a mystery. We don't need some overblown backstory about how, how did she get her shotgun? How did she get her arm ripped off? Why is she bald? Why does she have like the fucking oil on her face? Like, we don't need every single question. That's what a lot of prequels do.
It's sort of,
unfortunately.
It reminds me of what they did with that Solo movie where they were like,
it's like, what's your name? Han what? Oh, I don't have a last name. Solo. It's like, really?
Solo.
We gotta explain,
some mysteries do not need
we gotta explain this. Or X-Men Origins Wolverine. Oh, how did he get his leather jacket? God forbid if it's just like he thought it looked cool and he bought it at a store. No, we have to have some fucking backstory. Hell, even great movies have done this, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That cold open, he gets every single thing he's fucking iconic for in that one little mini-sode of the Young Indiana Jones adventure starring River Phoenix. We didn't need to see that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is one of my favorite movies of all time. I adore that movie. Top 10. Best Indiana Jones movie. Amazing. However, it's still like something to keep in mind, I guess, because it's just, I hate when prequels do that. It's just so silly to me. It's just like, oh, they just so happen to get every iconic thing from their adventure in one adventure from a future one. It's like, do we really need to see that? So yeah, I don't hate this movie. It's just like, I was so utterly disappointed, even though I didn't have a ton of high expectations for this, that it was just like, and the fact that like everybody was kind of like, was like egging it on. Like, I saw like Khan, you had the standing ovation like they do for every fucking movie. that like I saw really good reviews on Letterboxd. I was kind of getting a little bit hyped for it, but like it just kind of let me down. It was just pretty fucking boring for most of it, and I would say still go see it because the theaters need it. We need to show that theaters are important, and maybe you'll like it. Support your local movie theater. Go see Furiosa and Garfield back to back. Well, unless it's a steaming pile, we'll know in a second. But in terms of Furiosa, I would say still go watch it, please, because we need to show that theaters are important. It's an integral part of cinema, and I don't think I could like live on this earth if the movie theater industry and that integral part of cinema is eradicated. I don't think I can, because that is just a sad future to see. So please still go see it, even though I didn't care for it. However, be forewarned, there is one scene where Chris Hemsworth gets his nipples ripped off. Just keep that in mind. I unfortunately had to see that. I got no warning, so I'm warning you now. You'll know it when you see it. Just be careful, all right?
Thank you for that warning. As somebody who has not seen it
didn't
yet,
help the Chris Hemsworth debate, in my opinion, but fair warning. I hope people like it. Like, I don't want to hate this movie. I was just so disappointed, but I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's fine, but it's
got a 90% Rotten Tomatoes score from both audiences and critics.
So people out there will probably like it a hell of a lot more than me, but support your local movie theaters.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare that you see 90s in both sides of that spectrum, right? Like both critics and audiences agree at that level. By the way, it's blowing my mind that The Crow is sitting with an 85% certified fresh score, but we'll get into that when that movie's about to come out. I did want to take a quick look at these reviews because it looks like when you go through both the audience and the critics reviews, people are loving this movie. It feels like it's just the box office hasn't quite recovered, and the Mad Max Saga isn't for everybody. It's not like a 4-quadrant movie where you could take your whole family to it. It's not a Marvel or a Star Wars movie. It's not like a DC superhero film. So you do have, and it's rated R, right? So there's only there's some restrictions as to who's going to go see it. This is not going to be the first pick for somebody who walks into a theater necessarily and say, hey, I'm here to see Furiosa Mad Max Saga. But when you look at the reviews, they're fantastic. I mean, it's in some ways like record-breaking good is for the franchise and for a movie coming out on Memorial Day weekend, that it's got 90% from both the audiences and the critics. But it is struggling at the box office. We were talking about it earlier. It just edged out Garfield, but both of the movies made like under $40 million. If you're looking at the all-time holiday weekend openings, Top Gun Mavericks only 2 years ago broke the record for Memorial Day weekend with $160 million. Just last year, The Little Mermaid, the live action remake, made almost $120 million. And then when you look at it, you go down from like the top 10 all the way into like the 30s, and Furiosa sits at 37 and the Garfield movie sits at 38. And both of them have barely crossed like the $30 million mark. I know that Furiosa was initially tracking for like 40, but it's coming in way below that. The Garfield movie got an early release in some markets internationally, so it was already, bringing in some cash through there. So that has helped its cause. But for Furiosa, which has been made for almost $170 million, if reports are to be believed, that's not a good start. That's not a good start at all. Like, when it comes down to it, this movie is going to have a hard time making its money back, and that's unfortunate because, I mean, it's a movie that's part of a franchise. I mean, John, I know you're disappointed with it, but I mean, if people are not supporting the movies, then that's where things will come to an end. Hopefully people are going to support the movies. Today is still Memorial Day when we're doing the show live. So if you haven't gone to see the movies yet and you still have time in your day, then please go check it out. And if you didn't like Furiosa, then maybe you'll like Garfield, because that's the next movie we're going to review. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll start off with this.
We're gonna need the big scale!
Does she need to announce it to the whole office? Oh, cheddar. Probably one of my top 26 favorite cheeses.
Well, Garfield, I watched the Garfield movie, and Theaters were packed today. I'll be honest. I was getting showtimes and looking at like, I was trying to go to an AMC, and whichever showtime I looked at, it was hard to find an empty seat, quite frankly, and I was surprised. But I shouldn't be, because that seems to be what had been happening for some time. And when you look at this movie, it's you ask yourself the question, why did they make another Garfield movie? Because I know they made like 2 live action ones back in the mid 2000s, and I remember those movies, like Garfield the movie, and then there was Garfield like Tale of Two Kitties, which they were good for the time. They were like, yeah, so they were live action movies, so you were, this is completely animated, so I do understand that there's a difference. They're not just rehashing the same old stuff. Chris Pratt, of course, voices Garfield. If you want to know whether this movie is worth a watch in a theater or not, here's what I will say. I had fun with the film, because I can enjoy a good animated movie, not have to feel like it needs to be something that is going to change my life or my view on life like a Pixar movie does. I could just go have fun with like The Secret Life of Pets. It's that kind of a movie. Like, you're gonna go watch this movie and you'll be like, you know what, that was fun. I had a fun time in the movie theater. I mean, John, did you at all have any interest in this movie?
I do. Like, I'm a big Garfield fan. I love the character. I know he's kind of a meme and a lot of people make fun of him at this point, but I like him, and I like Chris Pratt, and I know I get a lot of hate for that, but I don't care. I like, you know, I like both of them. So I was curious about this. I know it's not gonna be the greatest thing ever, but I think it'll be a fun time. It'll probably be, God knows, better than the Bill Murray movies. So, I'm excited for it. Like, I do eventually plan to see it. I didn't have the time over the weekend is all. So I'll be seeing that hopefully sometime this week. Um but yeah, it just looks, I feel like it does get the humor a little bit with like a
There's
little
Yeah.
bit of insertion with like like more mainstream kids humor. Like, it kind of has that balance, and so I'll definitely be seeing it. Like, it looks like a silly fun time.
It is. It's the kind of movie where, like I said, you're not gonna necessarily come out of it like think it's not Ratatouille. It's not that kind of a movie. It's not The Lion King. It's not gonna like affect you emotionally in such a way. Although there are moments where I was like tearing up a little bit, because they're like, there's emotionally poignant moments in there. But I'm a sucker for that kind of thing, so I might be a little biased in that way. You might be like, didn't have an effect on me, and that's fair. But for me, it's a movie that gets all the basics of what a Garfield movie should be, right? Like, Odie is definitely one of the best characters on screen the whole time throughout the movie. So I really enjoyed, every time he was on screen. Chris Pratt's voice, I noticed that it was Chris Pratt for like the first 5 minutes, and then once I got into the movie, I didn't really notice that we were listening to Chris Pratt voice Garfield, because I think he really kind of just fit the sleeve in terms of just becoming the character. Like, you didn't, like in the Super Mario Bros. Movie last year, he voices Mario, and you're like maybe noticing it for the first few minutes, because that's a lot of what people were talking about going into the film. But once the movie gets going, Chris Pratt has got that skill and talent where you just kind of believe the character at that point, and you just are invested in the movie. That's one thing I will say about this. As far as whether this movie, got me invested or not, the first it starts off a little like slow, and then it goes in like this weird direction where the movie is a little meta in the way that Garfield does, of course, as is typical of Garfield, break the fourth wall and talk to you. And Garfield does tell you pretty early on, this is not the Garfield movie you thought you were going to be seeing, because this isn't the same kind of Garfield story we have gone for many of the other movies. They, spoiler alert, have the story focusing a lot around his dad, like Papa Cat or whatever. I forgot the name of that character, but who apparently left him to fend for himself on the street, which also tends to become, as we find out as the movie goes on, is not exactly true. And that's how he finds his way to John, and then gets adopted and taken in. And then Garfield, of course, we don't really, they kind of skip across how Odie comes into the picture and all that, but ultimately
It's like, it's a Garfield movie. You got to have Odie.
It's yeah. I mean, they didn't really. Whereas I remember the first live action Garfield movie, like Odie being adopted was a big part of like Garfield now is to share everything, and she isn't the only pet, and so that was like a big thing that they played upon. And here they sort of just skip past it. It's like they both have a loving relationship. Well, loving relationship in the sense that a dog really loves the cat, and the cat is like, doing her own thing, kind of a thing, which is how cats and dogs are. But I did enjoy Samuel Jackson's voice. He voices Garfield's dad, and it took me a few minutes. I was like, "Is that Samuel Jackson? Is that honey? Where is my super suit?" Like that. I was like, "Okay, I'm hearing it." Then there it is. So, but I had fun with the movie. It's like there's Sam Jackson's character in the middle. Papa Cat. I don't know what the name of the character is again. I didn't really. This is not one of those movies where if you don't know the names of the characters that you're gonna miss anything. John is barely in the movie. Like he's just there as the worried pet owner who is conveniently there to
I know a lot
save
of
them at
people were
times in the
pissed
movie.
about that. They're like, why John? He's integral. I'm like, is he though? It's John.
It's not. Yeah,
nobody really gives a fuck about John.
I'm like, but that was the thing though, right? Like a lot of people when this movie got announced were thinking that this was probably going to be a rehash of all the same standard Garfield origin story or something to that effect. And I think what they tried to do here, to their credit, is they made a Garfield movie that doesn't retread old ground. They do try to take it in a new, different direction. And so in that way, I thought it was refreshing. Huh?
This scene is brought to you by Pop
Dude. Oh yeah, this whole movie has a ton of very blatant brand like placements.
Oh my god, it's a Michael Bay movie.
It's a yes, like when the Transformer lands in the middle of Detroit, and then they get out of the car or whatever, and there's like a whole Budweiser truck that's emptied out, and then he's like, "You have to pay. You have to pay for that." Like, and then this was one of the Mark Wahlberg movies, and he just like pops open a bud on the guy's broken window of his car that got smashed. And I'm just like, yes. Or when the Transformers randomly tumble through a Victoria's Secret double-decker bus that clearly had no business just being there. It's kind of like that, where at the end of the movie, like Garfield just gets on her phone, or John's phone, and just orders a delivery from Walmart, and then says that the delivery option she picks is now. I'm like, that would be me, so I could relate to that. And then like a FedEx box gets dropped with a big ass FedEx logo on it, and then they're just sitting there. I mean, it was just there were brand placement all over, so that's something you gotta get used to.
Although
but
they do use generic toothpaste, they don't have like
toothpaste.
Colgate. It's just
no,
toothpaste.
Yeah, no Crest or Colgate. They're just generic toothpaste and toothbrush. There's definitely a lot of food eating. The movie,
for me, with my fat ass, I'll probably be hankering for something after this.
I mean, this lasagna looks delicious.
And just fucking hoard it.
Hell yeah. Overall, it's like I said before, this isn't anything extraordinary. It's not something that you haven't seen before. But it's a fun time at the movies. Like if you're gonna go watch a movie with your family, you can certainly be watching worse films. And in terms of any other movies like it out there aren't many. Like this movie definitely stands out as, I think, the only really like kids kind of animation that's out there right now. And it does have those moments where, like, if you had young kids, like they'll have fun, they'll laugh, they'll cry, they'll probably ask you some questions, and that's it hits all the key points. And there were definitely a lot of cute. There's a lot of humorous moments where, for example, at one point so they're like devising this plan, like in those Ocean's movies, to like do a heist, and they very much lean into all those pop cultural references. So like while the papa, well, no, what was the name, the guy who plays the bull? I'm forgetting the name of the actor. He's like he's basically like.
Was it Ving Rhames or?
Yes, that was Ving Rhames. Yes, that was. And so he's drawing it on the sand, and then he's like picking like on a Monopoly board. He picks out pieces, and so he assigns like Odie like a badger or something who's like overly eager, and Papa Garfield is like a snail, and then Garfield is like roadkill, or like a possum, because they love to pretend to be dead, because that's a thing. So he's like, whoa, do I have to be roadkill? But then there, as we're showing the plan that they're talking about in action, as in an Ocean's movie they would, you're hearing the Mission Impossible music playing, literally the Mission Impossible music or version of it. I'm like, they must have licensed it. And then later on, like Garfield, of course, has other callbacks like, well, Daniel Day Possum here. And I'm like, I see what you did there, Daniel Day Possum. I can appreciate that. I mean, most kids will have no idea who Daniel Day Lewis is because the guy's been retired for years, and most kids will probably not come across a movie until they get into film school, and even then they'll be like, so what? Like the guy.
Oh
was
no, I
around
was
for a few
watching
years.
My Left Foot even as a 3-year-old. What are you talking about?
but anyway, like, you know, there's also a lot of Top Gun and Tom, so obviously Mission Impossible, and then later on in the third act of the movie, okay, so Garfield loves getting food delivered, and apparently, you know, she's like living in the future because she gets drone deliveries done for her food. So they set that up early, and that has a payoff because they have a train fight scene where they're fighting on top of a moving train, which is already a Tom Cruise like Mission Impossible callback because
They
all the way from the
must
first
really
movie
fucking
to
love
the
Tom Cruise at that
to the late.
point.
Exactly. I'm like, I was to the point I was wondering, is Tom Cruise an executive producer on this movie? Because then as that is happening, Garfield, like, for whatever, I forget the reason why she has to make a save, she orders like $6,000 worth of drone deliveries, and so these fleet of drones flies in, and as they do, we literally are getting the Top Gun music in the background, and then she's using a drone to get rid of all the folks, and then later on she's riding on one of the drones to drop kick a bad guy, and while she's doing that, she's like, or I keep saying while he's doing that, he goes like, was like, do I do my own stunts? Yes. And Tom Cruise. And so it was just the Tom Cruise love affair the whole time. They even have a moment where the train goes under a tunnel, and, you know, and the bad guy gets hit by the whole thing. So I had fun with it. Like, I really I enjoyed it. You know, it's the bad guy is not particularly memorable. But
Oh yeah,
were you really in it for that? You were probably
we're in
the
it
fun
for this
moments.
guy. Like, we want
it
to
for
see this
Garfield.
guy. Like, that's
And, you know, for me, the Tom Cruise callbacks were just a lot of fun because I always appreciate my Top Gun callbacks. And it's Memorial Day weekend. It was only 2 years ago that Top Gun Maverick was blowing it up. So I appreciate that Garfield, you know, kept that in mind. So yeah, if I were to say go, you know, watch it or not, but do you think this is a movie you're gonna check out next week when we don't really have a ton going on?
Sometime this week I'll definitely check it out. Like, I love me some Garfield. I sympathize. I relate to him a lot as a fat piece of shit who can't stop eating Italian food. Yeah, that's me.
Well, I certainly recommend it because there's not a ton of movies to go see out there. And there's the Olive Garden callback. That was towards the end of the movie.
Yeah,
of course. Like, because apparently
Scene
one
is
of
brought to
the
you by Olive Garden.
this scene is brought to you by one of the worst nightmares for Garfield is being at an Olive Garden and running out of breadsticks. And I'm like, I was
You could just stop at being in an
dude,
Olive Garden. You could just stop there, and that'll be a nightmare for most people. So, you know.
Because I just had a sly grin on my face because I've been in that position, and also like I've been to Olive Garden with my brother, and he would like carb load there. So I'm like, breadsticks and an Olive Garden is definitely a relatable experience. So I had fun with that. So there's definitely moments in this movie. I mean, overall, like if you watch this movie and just watch, you know, if you just go online to like movie clips on YouTube and watch it in 8 out of 9 clips or whatever, you will get the gist of the film. You're not going to miss much. And ultimately, I think that's the kind of movie this is, where, you know, you go in there, you have a fun time with it. If you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. You're not really it's not a movie that if you decided to skip that you'll be missing out on much. Let's be quite frank about that. But if it's definitely a movie that's, you know, getting a lot of attention. The theaters have been full, and when you look at its, you know, Rotten Tomato score, I know the critics don't like it, and I get it. It's
Do
not
they
really
like
all that
anything?
impressive.
Like, is that the?
I don't know. I mean, they're like Furiosa, so
I'm
they do
actually
like
kind
that.
of shocked. The Crow is actually having a positive score.
85%.
Really surprising.
We need to like investigate how that movie has an 85% certified fresh score. But I mean, that is insane. That is quite frankly insane.
Unless it's the original film. If it's the original
no,
film,
this is the new one.
I don't think it is. I think that's the original Brandon Lee version.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
That makes more
No.
sense because that's Brandon Lee. You see it.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
I
There's no
was
way
gonna
this got
say like
250,000.
if that one that's not supposed to come out for a couple months now. So like, why the
But
fuck
they
is that
must have.
getting?
Oh, you know what it is? Because it's the 30th anniversary, so they're
Oh, it got
re-releasing it.
re-released.
That's what it is. All right, we have solved this mystery. This was bothering me earlier when we were talking about Furiosa. But back to Garfield, 82% audience score. I mean, that's good, and the theaters are full. I can tell you that. I went to a theater; the theaters were full. All the showings were full. I'm like, I was surprised. I was just thinking I was just gonna get myself a seat right in the middle, go enjoy it by myself. But it's Memorial Day, so people are going to check this movie out. I mean, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about Garfield. Let us know what you think about Furiosa. These are just some of the movies that are out there. Of course, these are the 2 new movies out on Memorial Day weekend. If you went and saw it, then let us know what you think about it. Like and subscribe for more movie reviews like this. We are back here doing this each and every week. Next week, we will be reviewing another movie. But right now, we're going to move on to DCU Daily. So we'll switch gears and we'll be right back with that. All right, welcome back to the Also Curious Show, and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. Today we are talking about the Superman movie, and more specifically, today we are here to marvel at the bald head of Nicholas Hoult, because he's going to be playing our Lex Luthor, and we finally have a second look at it, because we sort of got a look. I mean, wasn't there a picture out there circulating on the web of Nicholas Hoult bald? I mean, wasn't he already bald in like one of the group shots
in
of the
the
cast?
crew picture? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised.
But he was kind of in the background of the image. But now we have like something that's a bit more detailed. What do you think about this, by the way? I just want to actually take a step back and ask you again, because it's been a while since we really talked about this. What do you think about Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor to begin with? And then we're gonna get into his look a little bit more.
I mean, he's a great actor. He wasn't the greatest beast. Like, he was fine as McCoy. But I mean, Kelsey Grammer was just too perfect for that role, even if he was in a garbage movie. But Nicholas Hoult was fine. And I think something I was really excited about when I heard him as Lex Luthor, because I know he'd been one of the runners up for Batman and Matt Reeves as Batman. I think he was one of the runners up for Superman as well. I don't know if it was this one. It might have been another one. I don't know. I think it was this one where he was a runner up. But
he was. Wasn't he paired off with like Emma Mackey or something? And they were gonna potentially be a Lois Lane and Clark Kent combo.
Maybe.
I feel like, anyway.
But yeah, he although it's funny how Anya Taylor-Joy is commenting, and she's in the new Mad Max movie, and even though it's not technically a Mad Max movie, and then he was in the previous one, so that is
they had that movie come out. What was the movie called last year? The one that they did together.
What was it?
They were in a movie together, right? What was it? The one with Voldemort in the lead role. I'm forgetting the name. I went and saw it.
Oh, The Menu. Yes, The Menu.
The Menu. Right.
I never got a chance to see it. I had too much shit going on that.
Nicholas Hoult plays a bit of a douchebag in it, like a little eccentric. And people were like, you know what? That kind of gives you Lex Luthor vibes. If he had more power and money, he could have played Lex Luthor. That's a pretty dark movie, but yes, I mean that's probably where Anya Taylor-Joy and him struck up a friendship.
Yeah, as well. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't. I like the bald look. I think it's fine. I wish they could have gone for maybe more of like a post-crisis look, where he was balding, and then eventually he, loses his hair, like finally. Because I mean, I like what they like. For instance, like Smallville, like the meteor shower caused him to lose his hair, and you had that, which was like. That's good. I liked that. That was like a good idea. But I feel like I don't know. Like I know people are like, oh, why is the bald man criticizing the bald head? I like the bald look. It's it's a classic look. But I just to give it like a little bit of like shaking it up a little bit, because I know Gene Hackman had hair technically, but he didn't want to shave, so he only like revealed it a little bit that he was bald. And then I know the John O'Shea or John Shea, the Lois and Clark one, he had hair because that was more like post-crisis. And then, but yeah, I just like, just give us a little bit of some different, like, Jesse Eisenberg, but like not looking like a tool, but like, just,
Well, he was playing a Mark Zuckerberg, basically. That's how he
yeah,
was
I know, but
portrayed. So.
hence a tool. Anyway, but I would have liked to like see like more of balding Lex Luthor. I think that could have been a cool thing. But with like now like Jeff Bezos being, prime asshole,
Oh,
I think they really want to, mimic that. So like, all right, got to make him bald again, which is fine.
I
Like,
see what
I
you
think
did
that
there. You just called him. Did you just call him a prime asshole? I totally see what you did there. I see what you did there.
yeah, I
The
would.
whole
Yeah, of course.
love the pun. Love the pun.
Hmm.
Appreciate it. Understated humor. I like it.
Yeah.
But by the way, this whole set of pictures that we have been getting, let me go back to his Instagram post here. He's doing like a special collaboration with Ferrari. Like he got
Yeah.
to drive their like Ferrari 296 on the track at Laguna Seca, which sounds like a really cool experience, and that looks like a really cool car. I've been to a couple of Ferrari shows on the track, and I'm like, I've seen like every flavor of Ferrari you can possibly imagine, and like I just could never get enough of that. And so I can only imagine like what that experience must have been like. But clearly he's still filming, so he's keeping up with the bald look, and he looks great. I mean, he looks good. He looks like somebody who could be menacing. I know as Beast, I feel like in those X-Men movies he never truly got to reach his full potential as a character because he was always like the fifth or sixth most important character in every scene, not to mention the whole movie. Whereas I think now with like being Lex Luthor, we were hopefully going to get to see him play something that's has a little more substance, especially because we know that James Gunn has basically told us that he is the main, villain of the movie, which I still find hard to believe because, I mean, unless they have something that's drastically different from what we have seen before. But we'll have to see how it goes. Are you looking forward to like what kind of role he does have in the movie, considering that
Oh yeah.
he is the
I mean,
main
I'm still
antagonist
disappointed
of the
that
film?
he is the main villain because it's just like give us something else, please, for the love of God. We've gotten like Lex Luthor in like 85% of like the movies that have come out. It's like, all right, give us something else. But I'm still, I'm still reasonably hyped. Like I'm skeptical but hopeful, So that's how I am.
That's good. That's good. I mean, hey, look, he looks great with or without hair. He's a talented actor. He's one of the best, young rising stars in Hollywood today. And I'm glad that he's, in the DC stable and James Gunn has him amongst an all-star cast, which you can see here. I just finished watching the 4th season of For All Mankind that I was sitting on for a while, and Eddie Kategi's in there doing a fantastic job. I think David Cornsweet will probably pick up a few other roles after been in this movie, and Rachel Brosnahan, of course, is already a superstar. So you've got a lot of top tier talent in here, and of course Nathan Fillion up in the front. I'm forgetting the name of the actor in the back there. Is it Anthony Corrigan who's playing Metamorpho? Is that correct?
Anthony Kerrigan,
So,
I think it is.
Kerrigan, yes. So
Corrigan or
you've
Kerrigan?
got.
Right now, I don't know. Hold on,
I think it's Kerrigan.
let me look it up real.
The two of them will definitely be competing for who's got the best dome, so
Yeah.
we'll have to see. I can imagine James Gunn does insert a line or two of dialogue if they share the screen for us for a scene that they're gonna make a reference to that. Like, I see what you're doing there.
Maybe.
It's gonna be
I
interesting.
see you've copied my beard.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be interesting to see like what this look becomes. Obviously, we know now if Lex Luthor was to be racing, like maybe Iron Man was in the second Iron Man movie, that what
doing
he
like
looks
a
like
charity
with a
thing where
suit
it's
on.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
hi, and we're racing these for that sort of thing,
Right. We certainly know what that would look like. And he definitely pulls off the look well. So yeah, well that's I mean, it's been a slow DC news weekend. I mean, but again, it's a holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. We heard about last week the Green Lantern story where James Gunn confirmed that we're getting all of those writers in the room. They're already working on the Lantern show, the scripts. You've got Tom King involved, Damon Lindelof, Chris Mundy, of course, the showrunner. James, by the way, before we get into this, I just wanted to touch upon James Gunn. Of course, it is Memorial Day weekend, and James Gunn does a fantastic job of tying in, DC into all these special occasions. And so, we do want to express our deepest gratitude as well to all those who have served across the US of A, and as well as, of course, abroad. So, speaking of James Gunn, he did, mention this on his social media, confirming that we do have a writers' room put together for the Lanterns. So
Mhm.
some of these names are very notable, like Tom King, who's been a big part of the collaboration with James Gunn, since the beginning
Unfortunately.
of him coming in. Of course, Chris Mundy, we knew for a long time was the showrunner. Not a long time, a relatively long time, maybe a few months.
Yeah.
Damon Lindelof, like, what are your thoughts about Damon Lindelof being on the team?
I think it's very not great. Like, don't get me wrong, he did a really good job with The Leftovers, but that's like the only good thing he's done, I feel. Like I tried Watchmen, I tried to watch Watchmen, that was a fucking steaming pile. And then I know after JJ Abrams left, he fucked up Lost. I know that. A lot of Lost fans fucking hate him. He ruined Tomorrowland. He ruined Prometheus, I don't get how this guy keeps getting fucking work. Whose dick is he sucking to get this keep fucking getting work? Like, I don't get it. Like, he has like a couple good projects here and there, but I just don't get how he keeps getting work. Like, he's so like incredibly not talented. And then on top of that, we have Tom King, who it was actually really funny after, it broke that it was this is like getting, yes, we teased last week that okay, these were maybe rumor mill, grain of salt. Now it's official. Chris Monday, most definitely, even though he's been unofficially official for the longest time. And same with Damon Lindelof. But Tom King is now entering the field. We don't know about all the other writers. We just know these three. So that might still be, grain of salt. That they might be, might not be, who knows. But when I was telling my buddy who has, read, he usually reads everything because he wants to judge everything against all the other things. So I was on the phone with him and I was like, oh yeah, so the new Lantern show, they released the guys who are writing the pilot and the Bible. He's like, oh, I'm like, Chris Mundy, you don't know who he is. He did the show called Ozark. He's like, okay. Damon Lindelof, he's like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, oh, and Tom King, he's like, oh, so this is gonna be bad. And I'm like, if you say so. And then I was telling him, because he doesn't really pay it.
Reaction.
Yeah, because I was telling he's not really aware of news stuff. Even before all this, I was still aware of film news. So I was I'm like, oh yeah, this is getting this. I'm like, yeah, they're adapting Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow as the movie. He's like, why? It was so boring. So he was just having a mental breakdown from all of this. He's like, why do they have Tom King? He sucks. And then we're talking about Booster Gold too. I'm like, they're looking for a showrunner. He's like, Tom King better not be fucking part of that, because he fucking made him into an idiot in his most recent thing. I'm like, what did he do? He's like, oh yeah, for Batman's birthday, he went back and saved Batman's parents and created a paradoxical world because he's a fucking idiot. I'm like, oh, that is bad. So
didn't the Flash already do that?
I just found that to be so funny.
Yeah,
and but I want to hold out hope that this will be good, but I don't have a ton of faith in it. Chris Mundy is pretty much the fucking guy who's gotta, he's like Atlas. He's just holding everything on his shoulders, while these two, guys who have a pretty not great track record are doing this shit. So it's
yeah, let's hope that Chris Mundy has a lot more sway on this show than those two guys do.
Yeah,
his track record is really solid. Especially drama, suspense, just giving you a great thriller of a show that was Ozark on Netflix. So yeah, I mean, hey, but it's good to know that this thing is moving forward, that they are putting this together, because as soon as they have all the scripts approved and we've got a full show ready to go into production, that's when we'll hopefully start getting casting news, and then we move forward and hopefully get a date for this. But yeah, I mean, hey, whether it was that or looking at Nicholas Holt's bald head, there's stuff moving, going along over at DC. Superman is more than halfway done filming, according to James Gunn. So we're getting there with that one as well. Of course, we know that Supergirl is now slated for release in 2026. There will be lots of more news in the world of DC and the DCU. So we'll be back here talking about that and so much more each and every day, Monday through Friday. As always, guys, come back and join us. If you're here often, then you can hit the subscribe button. That will help make sure that you know when we go live or have a new episode going up. And of course, you can always hit the like button or hit the dislike button, whichever. But we do appreciate the like button because that does, help us out with the YouTube algorithm gods. But until the next episode of DC Daily, go out there, watch something DC related, and then come back to us and talk to us about it. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, and until next week, we gotta preview the movie of the week next week. So for that, John, let's talk about it, right? So, Young Woman and the Sea. This is a movie that, I mean, quite frankly, like, I looked at the release calendar and I saw it and I'm like, it seems like the most notable out of 3 movies that are coming out next week, and I don't know truly how notable it's going to be.
It's a Disney production and it's got Daisy
It's
Ridley.
a Disney movie. It's based on a true story. Like, are you looking forward to it? It's got Daisy Ridley in the lead role.
I have no intention of watching this. I saw half of the trailer like months ago. I like when you brought it up, I'm like, do I know that? And I'm like, and then you started to explain the plot. I'm like, yeah, I remember, because usually I go into movies late because there's so many fucking previews nowadays. There's like half an hour of previews. Don't get me wrong, I love me some previews, but really half an hour. AMC, fucking calm down. But I saw like half of the trailer. I'm like, oh, this looks like every other generic biopic that we've seen in the last fucking 20 years. So outside of like Oppenheimer. So, and even then, that's calling it a biopic is almost like insulting it in a way. So yeah, like Daisy Ridley, I feel kind of bad for her because she got kind of unjustly treated with how fucking terrible the sequel trilogy was with Star Wars. So hopefully she'll do a good job here. Hopefully, she'll show off her real acting chops. Like, I think she's a decent actress, so I do think that she could show that off here. But I could not care any less than I already do at this point. It just looks like another biopic. I mean, I'm kind of over it at this point.
It comes at a time where summer movie weekends tend to always be filled with one big blockbuster after the other, and it looks like after this upcoming weekend we will have that for a while. But next week it just looks like this is going to be the biggest movie in wide release that's new that weekend. You can always go watch other movies, but the premise of the movie is interesting. Certainly, is based on the story of Trudy Ederle, who was the first woman to swim across the English Channel, and that's that's the character that Daisy Ridley is playing in this movie. And Disney movies like this sometimes hit you with some emotion that you didn't think you were going to get out of it. I've certainly watched some biopics like this that Disney has put out over the years, where going into it I was like, this looks very generic biopic that I'm not going to remember, and I came out of it like, oh, like the Queen of Katwe, for example, was a really emotionally moving, poignant movie. So, and then there's of course other movies. Like, I think there was a Chris Pine one that he was in that completely flopped a few years ago. So we'll have to see how it goes. It looks interesting. It's going to be our movie of the week next week. I'm sure there'll be other movie news as well that we will get into. Is it going to do well at the box office? Considering how Mad Max, how Furiosa did this week, how the Garfield movie did this week, neither of them got even close to $40 million. I have a feeling this movie will not do all that well, but it's a film that, I think every movie deserves a fair shot. And if you are out in the theaters next week and you want to watch a movie and you're not in the mood for a Garfield or Furiosa, or if you have already seen The Fall Guy or Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, then you still have Young Woman and the Sea. And there's some horror movie options out there. I personally would go to watch this instead because, you never know. Daisy Ridley is a fantastic actress. I think she probably got the short end of the stick for a lot of those Star Wars movies that I think if she had a better script to work with, she could have done a better job with. But, she's carving out a good career for herself. And I'm excited to see her in this film as well. John, we'll be back at it next week, talking about other DC news, talking about other Hollywood news, see how the box office is doing. It's been another great show. It's a special Memorial Day weekend show. Hope you guys have been having a great holiday weekend, and then, get back at it. It's going to be a short week. It's going to be fun. We'll see you back here on the show next week. Until then, as always, go out there, watch something in the movie theater. If you want to watch a movie at home, watch a TV show, come talk to us about it. We've been watching Dead Bug Detectives, the For All Mankind, Shogun. There's lots of good TV out there as well right now. Of course, if you're in a movie theater, there's tons of movies out there to watch. We know that a lot of people are not going to the movies, but we would love to encourage you to go do that. And of course, if you're on our channel, then you could hit the subscribe button. We do appreciate that. Hit the notification bell. That will let you know when we are live and we have a new video going up. And hit the like button because we do appreciate that. That gets us in front of a lot more eyes, and hopefully we'll keep the show growing. So until next week, John, we'll see you back here on Oh So Curious and For the Love of Movies.